The esteemed longtime sports editor for the Tuscaloosa News, Cecil Hurt, is with us this morning. Good morning, Cecil.
Hey, Gary. How are you?
Very well. Good to have you. I want to cover a number of subjects with you, and I'm going to start with one that's probably been pretty worn out by now, but still I want to get your take since I've got you on the program this morning. The Maurice Smith situation, water under the bridge now. He's at Georgia practicing with his new team, but this thing turned into a lot more probably than it should have been. I'm interested in your opinion in regards to the SEC and its role in this when clearly Nick Saban was using the SEC transfer rule to state his position, and we got the feeling, I think media people did, that he was waiting for the SEC to kind of step in and take the bull by the horn, so to speak. Finally, he just threw it in their lap. My question is, Cecil, could the SEC have done something quicker to have helped expedite this situation so it didn't turn into this big controversy that we saw?
Sure. When Maurice first indicated that he wanted to transfer in June, they could have, he could have been told he wasn't going to be released in the league, and the league could have told him that they were going to support that position. So they could have taken care of it at that point, and they could have told Georgia the same thing. They could have told Georgia that their position was that the transfer rule was in place and they weren't going to issue a waiver. Instead, they let it drag on and drag on and drag on. Ended up with two member institutions sort of at each other's throat a little bit, and that's not good for anybody.
No.
Not good for the league. So it's not really to do with where Maurice plays. I'm happy for Maurice if he thinks he's going to be happy at Georgia, but there's certain procedures. You can debate whether the rule is right or wrong, or whether the SEC needs to be in line with the NCAA rule, which does not require a waiver, does not require a year to sit out for grad transfers, regardless of whether they're released by their school or not. That rule is most people like that rule. Some basketball coaches don't like it because they think it's generated too many transfers in basketball, but it's a rule that can be reasonably debated. But there's a time and a place for that, and what the time and the place is the SEC meetings in Destin at the end of the year.
No doubt.
That's where you do it. And in lieu of doing that, you don't just put every case on the commissioner's desk. And, what's the next guy going to say? What's the next volleyball player going to say between now and then when she wants to transfer and her coach doesn't want her to transfer? What are you going to do? How are you going to stop her from going where she wants to go? You're not. You can't issue that waiver, even with all the conditions and so forth, and not issue the next person a waiver, because they're going to be passionate about their graduate degree too. So where it needed to be settled was in May at the SEC meetings, and I'm sure it'll come up next year, and it'll be a fascinating debate, and then we'll know where everybody stands. Because one thing that was happening while Nick Saban was taking a beating, the one coach who came out in support of what Nick Saban was doing was Brett Bielema.
Mm-hmm.
And Kirby Smart said, I'll release grad transfers, and everybody else sat back and is happy to let Nick Saban take a beating when they know they wouldn't release their guys either. So let's get everybody on the record. Let's get every institution voting, and then we'll know where we stand.
Absolutely. Well said, Cecil. Another thing that's come out of this, and you and I both know the passion of the SEC fans, that's what makes this conference so great, but all of the internet chatter back and forth between the two fan bases, and I know a lot of fans have said, well, now it's personal between Nick Saban and Kirby Smart, but you and I both have been around Saban enough to know that he says he never makes it personal, not from his perspective. It's business when it's coaching. He has said that none of his personal relationships with any of the coaches that have worked for him have ever been affected by what has gone on professionally. In this case, do you think maybe that has happened, that it has gotten a little personal between Saban and Smart, or again, is that just internet chatter in your opinion?
I don't know. I don't know where you draw the line between personal and competitive. They're certainly competitive, but they're professionals and they understand. And the day Kirby accepted the Georgia job, Nick understood that his job now, Kirby's that is, was for Georgia to win football games, and Nick's job is for Alabama to win football games. Sometimes those interests aren't going to be the same, and certainly not in recruiting. So I think that they're both professional enough to understand that. So whether it's personal, you'd have to ask the two principals involved. But I think they understand it's a competitive business, and it's been that way for a long time.
Cecil Hurt, our guest on the Bud Light Hotline, presented by Adams Beverages. You make a great point, Cecil, and the thing about Kirby Smart, and I know a lot of Alabama fans have gotten upset because he was here for 9 years, but he does work for the University of Georgia. He is trying to get Georgia's program at the level of Alabama's, and what better way to endear yourself to your fans than to go after Alabama and Saban a little bit. I'm not saying that was necessarily the case in the Maurice Smith situation, but his loyalty, as you pointed out, is to the University of Georgia. That's who he works for. That's the way these coaches operate. They're loyal to who signs their paycheck. So you can't blame him for having Georgia's best interest at heart and not, really worrying about what Alabama thinks.
Right. He's not doing his job if he doesn't try to get every player to Georgia that he thinks can help Georgia. So from that standpoint, I don't have a problem with it. Now, you want, and I'm not saying Kirby's not, but I'm just saying in general principle, you want to be above board in what you're doing. You want to be within the rules. You want to be competing fairly if you're competing. But, as long as that's the case, then sure, absolutely, you want to get the best players you can, and you'll work as hard as you possibly can to get them, and you don't defer to somebody just because you used to work at their institution.
Cecil, you've been covering this program. When you started, Coach Bryant was the head coach. You've gone through all of them since then, Perkins and Curry and Stallings and DeBose, Franchione, Mike Price's short tenure, Mike Shula, now Nick Saban. A question I get a lot is, is Saban as good as Bryant? And I didn't cover Alabama when Bryant was here. Of course, I followed the program. You did cover Alabama when Bryant was here, and I know it's a totally different era. Game is completely different. Scholarships are different. But it's amazing to me that you would have a coach of Bryant status and then have one of Saban status at the same program, arguably, possibly the two greatest coaches in college football history. What are the similarities and what are some of the differences that you've observed covering both programs under those two legendary coaches?
Well, the difference is that given the amount of time, given the almost 35 years now that have passed, it's a different sport. And that doesn't mean one's better than the other. Coach Bryant had to deal with things going on in the state of Alabama, in the country, that Nick Saban never dreamed of having to deal with. By the same token, Nick Saban has to deal with things every day, media demands, electronic media, social media, that Coach Bryant never dreamed of. So they're doing, in a certain way, they're doing two different jobs. Obviously, they're still trying to win football. That's what it boils down to. I think the similarity is that, it's one thing to be a coach that tells kids what to do. You're the coach. You tell them, go out and run A or go out and practice at 6 o'clock in the morning. And most of your players are going to buy into that. But if you're a big enough coach and a big enough personality, it's not just that kids will do it, it's that they'll believe in it. It's they'll believe that that's the way you be successful. The way you get to that point is to win championships. But there's a different way that a player reacts to a head coach who they believe in and one who they just obey. There's two different concepts, and they both have that personality, that players want to do what that coach says because they have that belief in the coach. You can talk to players for Coach Bryant all the way back to his days at Kentucky, and you can tell that that's the case. And I think it's true with Nick Saban as well. That doesn't mean every player is going to like you. That doesn't mean every player is going to want to stick around, but it means that the guys who get out there on Saturday believe in what they're doing, and they believe in that head coach, and they believe that coach is going to win. And they both have that, and very few coaches have it.
Cecil, I look at the Alabama program and the ups and downs it went through after Saban, but that all the parts are in place here to win. There's passion to win. There's a history and tradition of winning. So when you get the right coach, you're going to have a chance at success. We even saw it with Stallings and so all the other coaches, at least in one season, won 10 games or more. But to get a Saban and a Bryant, sometimes I just think, what are the odds? And, it could have been a lot different had things not fallen the way they did for Alabama with Nick Saban. But it's just, I don't think you could, as an Alabama fan, ever anticipate that in your lifetime you would see Coach Bryant coach the Crimson Tide and then have another coach that would even come close to the success level that he enjoyed, but yet it's happening. It's pretty unbelievable.
It is. You have to have some good fortune, as far, particularly in Nick's case. I think in Coach Bryant's case, coming back to the alma mater was always a dream for him, and it gave Alabama a bit of an advantage, although they certainly had to recruit and convince Coach Bryant to come. But I think that at the time that Nick was hired, I think that Mal Moore really understood, what the program needed, and he had been athletic director long enough. He had seen Mike Shula. Mike Shula is really a good person. People can criticize his coaching or not, but Mike's a good guy. Really tried in his way. He just wasn't suited to college coaching. He's probably much better suited to what he's doing now. But I think Mal observed those things. I think he understood things from having worked for Coach Bryant so long, and he knew that what the program needed was a really strong head coach. This wasn't the place for on-the-job training. It wasn't the place for a guy who couldn't handle criticism. And so he targeted the best guy he could get. And people say, oh, they almost got Rich Rodriguez and so forth, but they really wanted Nick Saban from the start. And he was the one person that they knew, if they could get him, would be successful. So I give Mal a lot of credit for that.
Cecil, it's a new season, obviously, and there are a lot of different position battles going on, but the one with the most focus on it is the quarterback position. You got three guys, Bateman, Barnett, and the true freshman Jalen Hurts, battling for the position. Saban said after the scrimmage on Saturday that none have separated from the others. There is a popular theory floating around that Saban's not going to play a true freshman quarterback, but you probably know him better than most media folks. Don't you think at the end of the day he's going to make the decision that gives his football team the best chance to win? So if that decision that gives the team the best chance to win is to play Jalen Hurts, do you think he'd have a problem with that?
No, but now you have to evaluate exactly what's meant by best chance to win. Sometimes that's created by giving yourself the least chance to lose and playing the guy who understands the offense, who doesn't turn the ball over, and so forth. That's the thing that works against. I don't think anybody is prejudiced or is reluctant to play a freshman per se just because he's a freshman. One of them, certainly years of experience in the program have a value and they help. But if a guy's ready, if he's good enough, then you're going to put him out there. You'd like him you'd like to be a good enough program to where you can redshirt all your quarterbacks. And a lot of great quarterbacks have been redshirted, including Jameis Winston, Johnny Manziel, guys who obviously could have helped their teams when they were true freshmen, but they got a redshirt year and it worked out for them. But here's the other thing about this. So sometimes, you're giving your team the best chance to win by not giving them an increased chance to lose. And I think that's there's nothing wrong with that. People say, oh, game managers, but Alabama's won a lot of football games with that philosophy. So we'll see what happens from that standpoint. The other thing, and the one thing that I think that the media just can't get a grasp on, particularly with the limited access that we have now, Nick never fails to talk about guys winning the team, winning the locker room, winning the respect of their teammates. And that's a really hard thing for us to gauge in the media because we just don't get to talk to those guys enough, don't have the relationships that we used to have in the media 20 or 25 years ago. But, the coaches are aware of it. And if the players see a guy who's going out there and clearly performing better and you play somebody else, that's not the way you win a team. That's not the way you win the confidence of a team. So hard to know. I'm not saying that's what's happening because we don't get to see enough, but that's certainly a variable in the decision that under certain circumstances can favor a freshman because the other guys, the other 80 guys on the team, scholarship players, they're out there and they see what's happening and they want the best guy too. So they're a factor in this decision as well.
Wrapping up with Cecil Hurt, sports editor of the Tuscaloosa News. You can follow him on Twitter at Cecil Hurt. Kendall Sheffield missed both practices yesterday, the redshirt freshman defensive back from Texas. Cecil, any news on what's going on with him?
No, I don't think we'll get any news, anything definitive until we, first of all, see if he's at practice this afternoon. If he's not, or even if he is, then I think that Coach Saban will address it in his press conference this afternoon. But I think that I don't think that there's a benign explanation like, oh, he had class or studying for a late final or something. I think he's wasn't there by his own personal choice, and the situation I don't know has resolved itself completely. But we'll have to see if he's there today and see what Coach Saban has to say about it.
Cecil, any concern with the Maurice Smith situation that there could be a little pushback in recruiting because of that, other staffs using that negatively against Alabama?
Always a concern in recruiting about everything, Gary. Anything that's not good, somebody's going to point it out. Alabama's dealt with negative recruiting since Nick Saban got here. How many hours was it from the time the plane landed with Nick Saban on it to guys telling recruits that Nick Saban was going to leave?
Immediately.
Immediately, fast as the plane landed. So yeah, there's a chance of that. There's anything that creates a negative perception that they can use to muddle 18-year-old minds. Somebody's going to lose. And they all say, oh, we don't do any negative recruiting. But they also make sure that prospects know about these things. So, sure, there's a chance of that.
Finally, Cecil, you put out a little basketball tidbit on Twitter last night. Alabama expected to get a grad transfer in just in time for classes to begin. I know we're going to call him Bola a lot because until we get his pronunciation of his last name.
Olaniyan, yeah.
Olaniyan. Okay, this is a guy, I watched some tape on him, Southern Illinois, a native of Nigeria. Only averaged 7.8 points a game, but he shot 57% from the field. He just didn't shoot a lot, but 8.8 rebounds, maybe a little undersized at 6'6", but 6'6", but big, muscular body. Clearly, when you've got a scholarship available, this is a good guy to add to your roster for 1 year.
Yeah, it's a no cost. It's like getting a free sample at Costco. They give it to you, and you have it, and you don't have to pay for it. So he certainly gets a scholarship, but he doesn't cost you a scholarship down the road is the point. He's a guy who's come in for a year. The two stats that are impressive about him, he was the number 2 rebounder in the Missouri Valley Conference last year, which was an area of need for Alabama, which struggled to rebound, particularly offensive rebound at times. And, he's a post guy who shot 67% from the line, close to 70%, which was a real problem for Alabama's offense, and not beating on Jimmy and Dante. It is what it is, but they were combined around 40% last year. So you didn't feel confident running a play to get the ball inside because other teams were just going to, late in the game, other teams would just foul those guys and put them on the line, and you didn't have much confidence that they were going to make one of two. Percentages were that they weren't going to make one out of two. That's a big difference in that and a guy who's going to make 2 out of 3 for you, and therefore has a pretty good chance of getting you 2 points. So I think that they like him in late game situations, both as a rebounder and a offensive option. He's an older, more mature guy. They liked him on his visit. That was important to him that he fit in with the other guys. So even if he just brings quality depth, that's important. They've got a full roster this year. Didn't have that last year, and they can use the muscle inside. So have to see how he works out with them over the next couple of months. But just on paper, it's a good addition.
Cecil, terrific information. I appreciate the time. Have a good day, my friend.
Okay, thanks a lot.